Midweek Murders contains graphic and explicit content. Listener discretion is advised.
The Germans have got some fun ones when you translate them.
Ooh, tell me all about it.
It's raining cats and dogs doesn't translate into that. I think it translates as it's pouring as if from a bucket.
Very literal. I like it. That's not even a metaphor. It's like
It's
describing.
raining as if poured from a bucket. Oh, fucking Germans.
Gotta love them. I don't know why I found that so funny. It's just
because
so
it's just so quintessentially German.
Yeah. It really is. I'm describing exactly what's happening right now.
It's a metaphor. I looked up the other German idioms that I couldn't remember.
Mm-hmm. While I was regaling you with my incredible story.
As soon as you were like, I watched Graham earlier, I was like, all right, this will go on for a while. I've got time.
And you were right.
So when you feel like you're going crazy, you say, Ich glaube, ich spinne,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I believe I spider.
What?
Yep. Not I believe I am a spider. I believe I spider.
What? This can't be true.
Yeah, apparently it's true. And the other good one was the phrase, it's all Greek to me. Are you familiar with that phrase?
Yeah.
Okay, so the German is Ich verstehe nur Bahnhof, which translates as I only understand train station.
I was like, the only thing I know that's Bahnhof is a train station.
Yeah.
That makes no sense. I like the raining one most because I will describe the weather. It's a metaphor.
It is raining. Oh, I'm so poetic.
Yeah. Oh, you want to know something mildly amusing? I was watching my favorite show, On the Rails, the one that I told you about before. And one of the music questions was, there was a band who did a cover on Wuthering Heights. And the question was, what is the name of this artist that did this song? And I couldn't, for the life of me, remember.
Kate Bush, innit?
Yeah, and I was like, I fucking know this question. I know it. And I couldn't come up with the answer. And I felt like you and Joe would disown me if you knew that.
I feel like I am not in any position to disown anyone over music trivia questions.
Ain't that the truth? I sat the whole time being like, it's the weird, like in the 80s to Nicholas, and I was like, she did that weird song about the babushka. You know that artist? And he was like, no, I have never heard this song before. I was like, it's the weird one.
So it could have been anyone from Sweden.
Who do you think about when you say that we have weird artists?
Zara Larsson, weird. Robin, weird. ABBA, weird.
I thought you would like Zara Larsson.
I do.
I was like, she's right up your alley, like a lady doing generic pop songs sounds like. We do a lot of music compared to how few people actually live in Sweden.
Well, you've got to be able to export something other than snow.
Yeah, it's true. We also have wood.
Giggity.
70 or 80 or 90% of the whole geographical layout of Sweden is just woods. And also, we have the oldest recorded tree that they have ever found. Did you know that?
Well, how do they know if it's still alive?
What do you mean?
The only way to age a tree is to chop it down.
I don't know. They can probably, take samples from it. You're the fucking forensics.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the only way to age a tree is to cut it down.
Nah, I don't believe that. They can do, carbon blah blah dating, can't they?
Can't do carbon dating on a tree.
Are you sure? They know that it's the oldest one, and I saw a photo. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Finally famous for something. And then I looked it up, and it's so sad. The photo of the tree, it just looks so abysmal. Barely has any green, just a little thin stump of
And this is why you didn't get into descriptive literature.
Hey, I'm the published author here. I was like, oh, cool, so cool. The redwood forest in America, so majestic, so incredible. And then I looked at this old tree.
Like, wow, it looks like a disgruntled old bonsai.
It should have died 10,000 years ago, man.
It's probably just like, I'm the oldest tree, I have no friends anymore, I can't keep up with the younger generation, and this is the fucking world I've inherited. What's the point? I'm not growing leaves anymore, I'll just fucking die.
Just cut me down and look at my rings.
Yeah, spot some scientists coming, and it's like, oh, finally they'll cut me down to see how old I am. And then they're just like, fucking carbon dating? What is this? Not fucking Treebeard over here, just cut me down.
Enough is enough.
I've lived through the Roman Empire, and you give me fucking Trump?
Do you know what I've seen?
I was a sapling when Genghis was conquering Mongolia. That's going to make it as one of the quotes, isn't it? And it's going to have nothing to do with the case.
I should put a photo of the tree on the website just to bum everyone out.
Look at this fucking ugly, depressed tree. Come on, Swedish foresters, just cut it down. I bet Zlatan could cut it down just by looking at it.
Oh yeah, the steel gaze of his steel gaze would just...
The steel gaze of his steel gaze.
Who was the author here?
His steely gaze was just... bleh. And as he gazed with his steel gaze, all those before him could not bear to sustain the gaze of his steely gaze.
Oh God, are you ready to start?
Chapter 2.
Zlatan woke up one morning.
To the prayers of the entire world. Ah, Zlatan, thou art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And he felt a tingle in his steely gaze.
I'm a spider, he said.
All these prayers are making me go insane. Ich glaube, ich spinne, said Zlatan.
Looking out of
the window while it rained as if poured from a bucket.
That was what I was going for. He listened to the prayers and said, I only understand the train station.
It's Wednesday, my dudes.
Which means that it's time to talk about crime. I'm your host, Sandra.
And I'm your host, Zlatan, with the steely gaze.
That's Joe, by the way. This week we're going to talk about the Candyman and the murder of Timothy O'Bryan. I got my information from Wikipedia, a website called Mamma Mia.
Here we go again.
And an article therein by Belinda Jepson. And a Medium article by Lisa Marie Fuqua. An article in the Dispatch from 1975. And a book called A Capital Case in America, How Today's Justice System Handles Death Penalty Cases from Crime Scene to Ultimate Execution of Sentence by David Crump and George Jacobs. I also read A Court of Criminal Appeals Decision, O'Bryan versus State. I'm done. Said Zlatan.
Well, someone's been busy.
Yeah.
I got my sources from the Houston Chronicle, the Gorgeous History Geeks. Yeah,
Ooh.
that's a thing.
Where can I join?
Historical Crime Detective, and a case study on a website that is a .edu, so I'm assuming it's totes legit.
Okay. On Halloween 1974, Ronald Clark O'Bryan went out trick-or-treating in Pasadena, Texas, with his two children, Timothy, 8 years old, and Elizabeth, 5 years old. With them was two other children and those children's father, Jim Bates. Whilst walking around the Bates family's neighborhood, as this was a more affluent area, they had rung the doorbell at a house where the lights were off, and unsurprisingly, no one answered. The children then ran ahead to try their luck at the next house. Ronald was left behind for a couple of minutes, and in the book it said 30 seconds, but I don't know. But soon caught up to the group, at which point he gave the kids 5 pixie sticks with a lot of X's. Pixie sticks. That's for you, YouTube transcription service.
Translate that, bitch.
Which he claimed to have acquired at the previous house where someone had answered the door after the group had left.
But only with their arm, which was described as hairy. Dun dun dun. Tune in next week to see if gorillas can be homeowners.
I think a lot of people have hairy arms.
Enough so that when it's dark and the doors only open a slither, enough to tell that they're half orangutan. I don't think people have arms that are that hairy.
I don't want to out Nicholas here, but he has hairy knuckles. I'm just saying.
Well, then he's probably very closely related to the missing link.
Wow.
We should cut him open and count his rings.
Carbon date him. Yeah. He told Jim Bates, "You've got rich neighbors. Look at what they're handing out." And I was like, 5 pixie sticks.
Fucking sherbet.
I was like, really?
No, you're right, Ronald. Usually we just get a grape.
I was like, at least give out some like full-sized Snicker bars. That's a rich neighborhood.
Oh, what a haul that would be.
Yeah, 5 pixie sticks. I would be disappointed. So the rain that night was pouring out of a bucket. So it cut the trick-or-treating short, and before the group said their goodbyes, Ronald gave 1 pixie sticks to each of the children. And then, because there was 4 children, he then gave the last one to a random boy who went to the same church as the O'Bryan family, where Ronald was a deacon and sang in the choir. Before going to bed that evening, the O'Bryan children were given permission to eat 1 piece of candy each. Timothy either chose or was given his pixie sticks. He reportedly had some trouble getting the candy out of the package and asked his father for help. Timothy then ate some, but complained about the taste of it, as the sweet and sour powdered candy tasted, quote, bitter, unquote. What are you laughing about?
Could have just said bitter.
Bitter. It tasted bitter.
Ewy, get me some Kool-Aid.
Ewy. Are you spoiling the whole case? Ronald.
I'm in this podcast too.
Are you though? I'm kidding. So Ronald gave Timothy some Kool-Aid to wash the bitterness down, after which Timothy complained about stomach pains and then ran to the bathroom where he proceeded to vomit and convulse. Timothy died in an ambulance on the way to the hospital less than an hour after tasting the candy. Timothy's death sparked a panic in the neighborhood they lived in, Deer Park, and the surrounding areas. Parents all around Pasadena collected the candy their children had been given on Halloween and handed it over to the police, as fears about there being some person out there handing out poisoned candy grew. Timothy's autopsy results showed that the pixie sticks he had consumed contained a lethal dose of potassium cyanide, which prompted police to immediately search for the 4 remaining pieces of pixie sticks that had been given out that night. The parents of Whitney, the boy who Ronald had given the 5th piece to, panicked after receiving the phone call from police about the candy, as they could not find it in the house. In the house? House?
In the house.
I'm so German when I say house. House.
I think I spied her.
I think I spied her. They then ran up to the boy's bedroom and found it clutched in the sleeping boy's hand. Fortunately, he had been unable to open the package as it was stapled shut. After examining the 4 unconsumed pixie sticks, the police found that they had all been topped up with lethal amounts of cyanide and stapled shut. This might be a stupid question, but here it comes. Hold your judgment, man. Is there a difference between potassium cyanide and potassium?
Yes.
What is potassium cyanide?
So potassium cyanide is just a salt of potassium and cyanide. So like table salt is sodium chloride, it's made up of sodium and chlorine. Mm-hmm. Potassium cyanide is a salt that's made up of potassium and cyanide. Mm-hmm. So it's just a way that those 2 chemicals can coexist.
Okay. Do you have some things about the autopsy or potassium cyanide?
I couldn't find anything about the autopsy. Did you find stuff about the autopsy?
I didn't even look into it, mate, because I was like, he's going to cover it.
Not my job.
Well, I guess we can say that he died very quickly, and the thing I could find was that the pixie sticks he consumed was filled with enough potassium cyanide to be lethal for 2 adults.
Yeah, so supposedly the cause of death was pretty obviously cyanide poisoning. I can't confirm that because, like I said, I didn't access the autopsy reports, but that's where it's all documented. The media reports of Timothy's symptoms match cyanide poisoning, so headaches, dizziness, tachycardia, shortness of breath, vomiting. And the onset of symptoms with cyanide poisoning is very, very rapid. It's a couple of minutes. So that fits in as well. It's not like there was a completely different time frame of when it was reported that he died and the efficacy of cyanide poisoning. The way that cyanide poisoning works is a lovely, easy thing to pronounce. Histotoxic hypoxia.
Histotoxic hypoxia. Bam!
Histotoxic.
Histotoxic.
See, told you it wasn't that easy.
I had it the first time.
Which is basically the inability of the cells to take up oxygen. So the cyanide binds onto part of a protein in cells, which is where the oxygen should bind instead. So it basically blocks that channel for the oxygen to be absorbed. So a lot of first-line treatments for unknown headache, dizziness, etc. is to administer oxygen. And that's going to be completely pointless with cyanide poisoning because it's not a problem of not having enough oxygen in the blood. It's just the cells can't absorb it from the blood. So the only treatment for cyanide poisoning is to introduce a substance that is more attractive to the cyanide bonding than the protein receptor is. But obviously they need to know that it's cyanide poisoning to be able to know which drug to administer.
What drug would that be?
It's a thiosulfide. So in terms of the dosage, the LD50 is disputed in different sources, but one that I found was 1 to 3 milligrams per kilogram.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can't use our lovely 70 kilos as an example because the kid was only 8. So I looked up the average weight of an 8-year-old boy, which is going to have a drastic effect on my internet advertising. So you're welcome.
Oh, God.
So an approximate weight for a healthy 8-year-old boy is about 25, 26 kilos. Which means that according to the reports of it being enough to kill 2 adults, there must have been about 140 milligrams of potassium cyanide in the pixie sticks.
I think I read something about there being between 2 and 3, and that might have been grams.
That seems like an extortionately high amount.
Okay. Maybe 0.2 and 0.3, I don't remember.
Which would be 200 to 300 milligrams, which could be right. But even if we take the 2 to 3 grams, imagine a 20 pence piece that weighs 5 grams. The point of that comparison is just to show how little potassium cyanide you'd need to kill multiple people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the people that he spoke to, a chemical salesperson who actually gave evidence to the police against Ronald, he was visited by Ronald who wanted to buy some cyanide.
Mm-hmm.
And he only had it in quantities of 5 pounds, which is 2.268 kilograms.
Yeah.
So that's thousands of magnitude more than he put in the pixie sticks, which was enough to kill 2 or 3 fully grown adult men. So this guy really made sure that these kids were going to die if they ate this naughty sherbet.
Naughty sherbet. Yeah.
Oh, also, interestingly, one thing that I saw, one of the paramedics was going to administer mouth-to-mouth in the ambulance to try and resuscitate Timothy. He didn't, and I don't know the reason behind not doing it, maybe because he was already dead. But there was enough cyanide still in Timothy's mouth to have killed the paramedic from administering mouth-to-mouth.
That's crazy. Another question. Potassium, does that have different effects than cyanide?
Yes. Potassium as a raw element is incredibly volatile. If you put it in water, it will explode.
Oh, God, I didn't know that. So if you put enough bananas...
No. As soon as you take it out of its raw elemental form and mix it with something else, in this case cyanide, it completely changes the chemical properties. And again, to use the example of salt, normal table salt, sodium chloride, elemental sodium is in the same group as potassium. So if you put elemental sodium in water, it will explode.
Oh, God.
Chlorine is obviously toxic to people. That's why mustard gas is a thing. It's why if you accidentally make chlorine gas, you have to have a whole bunch of health and safety people assess whether it's safe to return to work. It will burn you from the inside out. Chlorine is a horrible, horrible gas.
How can that accidentally happen?
If you mix cleaning products, for example, but basically adding two things that shouldn't be added can cause a chemical reaction that will give off chlorine gas.
Oh.
So those two elements by themselves are horrifically dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Mix them together and you get one of the most common condiments in the world,
Mm-hmm.
salt.
Especially if you're a Swede. Salty goodness everywhere.
They put it in their fucking sweets, the weirdos.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, potassium and cyanide, when administered separately, will have completely different, well, cyanide not so much, but yeah, they will react differently if they're in their raw elemental form.
Okay. Is convulsions also a symptom of cyanide poisoning?
It's a progressive symptom, so it's one of the secondary sets of symptoms is seizures. So it goes from headache, dizziness, tachycardia, which is a fast heart rate, shortness of breath and vomiting, and then it progresses to seizures, bradycardia or bradycardia, which is a slow heart rate, a decreased blood pressure, unconsciousness, and then cardiac arrest. The onset of symptoms is really quick, and he died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. But fortunately for him, probably unconsciousness is another symptom, so he probably would have passed out before, I was going to say before it got too bad, but he wouldn't have been conscious for the whole thing.
Yeah, that's good. I also read that pixie sticks are heat sealed, so the fact that all of the pixie sticks that Ronald had given out were stapled shut is definitely not a thing that they do at the factory.
I think it is.
No, they said that it wasn't.
I don't know if it's the same brand, but definitely in my childhood there was a stick of sherbet that came in a tube that was both heat sealed and stapled shut.
It might be another brand then, probably.
Quite possibly.
I've never heard of pixie sticks. I don't think we have it in Sweden.
From reading through everything, my suspicions weren't raised when it said that they were stapled shut.
Yeah, but I read that the factory confirmed that they all were heat sealed in both ends. So, giggity. When the police interviewed Ronald, he first claimed that he couldn't remember at what house he was given the sticks, even though the group had only stopped at 2 houses as the rain had cut the trick-or-treating short. After the police had requested that Ronald show them the house, and after them walking around the area 3 times, this might have been separate times or not separate times, I don't know, Ronald suddenly remembered, in air quotes, where he had gotten the candy and led the police to the house where nobody had answered. To the house where nobody had answered the doorbell until the children had run ahead. He then told police that the occupant of the house had only cracked open the door and handed the candy over without showing his face. As we said, the only thing Ronald had seen, in air quotes, of the occupant, Ronald claimed, was a hairy arm. There he comes. I should have just skipped that, but no, it's in there.
Oh, that's the title of my sex tape.
Skipped it. But now it's in there.
Now it's in there.
Sigh. The house was owned by a Mr. Courtney Melvin, who had around 200 witnesses that could attest that he had been at work at the time of when the trick-or-treating had taken place. During the investigation, the police realized that Ronald was $100,000 in debt, which is about $520,000 in today's money, which is crazy amounts of debt. Am I the only one who thinks that this is ridiculous? In the 1970s, how in the fuck did they get that much debt? Did they buy a plane?
Well, I think one of the sources that I read said that I think it was in the preceding 4 years, Ronald had and been fired or quit 21 jobs.
I saw that as well, but also, if he was working, even if it was 21
Well, he obviously
times,
wasn't.
Yeah, but if he was working 21 times, which must have been some money, how in the hell did they acquire that much debt?
Because they're American.
Yeah, maybe. So the police had also received a phone call from an insurance agent who informed them that Ronald had taken out $20,000 life insurances on his 2 children a couple of weeks before Halloween. And the O'Briens already had $10,000 life insurances on the children. And he had called the insurance company to try to collect on these the morning after Timothy had died, which is a big red flag. Ronald had also told his coworkers that he was quitting his job as he was about to get rich, even though the O'Briens had to move out of their house and their car was about to be repossessed. So, another big red flag. Ding, ding, ding! The police also searched the O'Briens' house, where they found a pair of scissors and a knife. The blades of the scissors, as well as the knife, had a plastic substance on them. The knife also had clear crystal particles that were water-soluble and contained sugar. They theorized that these crystal particles might be the same as the candy in a pixie sticks, but a comparison test failed to match the substances positively. So one of his colleagues remembered Ronald asking if just anyone, could purchase potassium cyanide, and a professor at the community college where Ronald were taking classes had gotten questions from him about how much poison it would take to kill different sized animals.
One of them coincidentally matched the same size as an 8-year-old child.
Did it?
Yeah.
Ronald O'Bryan was arrested and his trial started on May the 5th, 1975. At the trial, the defense tried to blame it on the urban myth about people handing out poison candy or candied apples with razors in them, even though this has never happened. But apparently it was a myth before this case happened, which is crazy because this is the first recorded instance of this ever happening. And also, it wasn't a stranger giving out the candies. It was his own dad. And also, the other cases of this even being remotely true is very similar circumstances. So it's like a family member or like stuff like that. It's never actually happened. So all of you listeners out there, you don't need to be scared.
Although, never accept sweets from a stranger. That's Strange Danger 101.
Oh yeah, that's true. I don't think anyone's ever rang our doorbell for Halloween here in London. I thought it would happen the first year, so I bought some candy, and the second year I bought some candy just in case. Never happened.
More for you.
Yeah. So even though the prosecutors couldn't prove where Ronald had bought the cyanide, it took the jury a mere 46 minutes to convict him, and he was sentenced to death for murder and 4 counts of attempted murder for the other Pixie Sticks packaging things that he gave out because they could prove that there was cyanide in all of them. Potassium cyanide, sorry. One prosecutor told the jury that Ronald had sacrificed his son on the altar of greed.
So biblical.
Yeah. Ronald's wife, Daylene, divorced him shortly after he was convicted. She claimed to have been unaware of the life insurance policies Ronald had taken out, although she did know about the $10,000 ones, just not the recent $20,000 ones, and called her husband a chronic liar, Deneen had previously tried to find a psychiatrist for him, as he had exhibited some strange behavior. And with that, I read something about him being like having a bayonet or some kind of weird shit that he was like pulling out and putting into the sheath
Half and half.
sheath a couple of times, and she was like, this is weird. And also she at one point thought that he would use it on her or on himself, but because she had wanted a good Christian psychiatrist and was unable to find one, she decided to give up on that and just seek the help of the Lord. Prayer is not a psychiatrist. Please treat your mental health with a professional. Deneen also informed the officers about 2 previous suspected insurance fraud instances where Ronald had taken out insurance policies on their furniture and belongings, and then somehow their belongings had caught fire.
Mashed them up with a bayonet.
Ronald O'Bryan was despised in prison by his fellow inmates for killing a child, and he was dubbed the Candy Man by media and was executed by lethal injection in 1984, during which a crowd of 300 people had gathered and shouted, "Trick or treat," which I felt like was the craziest part of this whole case.
It's America, innit?
Yeah. And also people used to go to public hangings, so I'm guessing it's not that weird.
No, but they tend to make lethal injections not public. Also, on the subject of lethal injections, for you historical nerds that are listening, and you, Sandra, because you're a historical nerd, he was sentenced to death by the electric chair.
Yeah.
And by the time it got to his date of execution, because it was postponed 3 times, it was actually 8 years after he'd been sentenced that he was executed. And by that time, they had stopped execution by electric chair. And he was the first Texan to be executed by lethal injection.
Was he?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know he was the first, but also, thank God they stopped the electric chair things.
One of his appeals to have it postponed and to go to retrial was on the basis that the lethal injection was inhumane.
Well, it is, isn't it?
No, but even if you were to consider it inhumane, compare it to the electric chair.
Yeah. I just think that it's because I don't agree with executing people. I think that even though the evidence were circumstantial in this case, I don't think that there's any question about him being guilty, though.
No, which is why he was sentenced so quickly by the jury.
Yeah, I think so too, but it really sounds like he was a major idiot about the whole thing. It's like he didn't even try to hide it. It's so crazy. He also told like his brother-in-law and sister-in-law that he was planning on taking a vacation on the funeral. He was like, yeah, with all this new money I got into, I'm gonna treat myself to a vacation. I'm like, what the fuck? He was so stupid. What are you gonna do now?
Sleep, probably. I've been up since 6:30.
Oh yeah, good lord. I played some computer
Some
games
sad violin music. Oh, okay, yep.
before we started recording, and I just shot everyone. Well, I shot some of them with sleep darts, so I'm like, that doesn't count. They're still alive.
And that's why deep down I'm a good person.
And then one of them that I shot with a sleep dart got eaten by rats, and I'm like, that's not my problem. I didn't cause that.
You are basically the story of the Greek gods. You've been sentenced to death, but I can't do it myself. I know, I'll just leave you out in the wilderness for the wild animals to get you. And
Yeah.
therefore, I didn't actually kill you, but you still died.
With loads of illegitimate children as well.
Yeah, just left out in the forest to get adopted by bears.
That's me. I hope they're all right. No, I'm just kidding.
What, your illegitimate children?
Okay. Thank you so much for listening to Midweek Murders. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Oh,
Oh, I thought you were on the toilet. I was like, worst timing ever.
worst outro ever.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Salut. Wuthering, 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 wuthering cliff. It's me, Kathy, I've come home. I'm so cold in your window.